Welcome to the next session of this premarital class, Family in the Insta Culture.
And our second part is called His and Her Needs. In the first part, we were talking about God's design, how He wants two different people with different identities, backgrounds, their past, to become one flesh. It's a long process, but it's possible, and God is interested into helping us. Today, we want to continue talking about the needs of your partner.
Do you think you know what your spouse or what your mate needs? Probably you think you know, but the truth is that gender differences influence our needs, and what a wife needs is usually not what the husband needs. What a wife thinks the husband needs is usually not what the husband really needs. So let's take a look at what exactly he needs and what exactly she needs.
The Bible says that let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. And it's in the context of the church, obviously. And this is something that we can apply to both males, females, in marriage, outside of marriage. But in the marriage, that becomes really visible because two people have to live not just for a few days, weeks, but for the whole life. And you can pretend or you can fake certain things for days, maybe for weeks or months. But sooner or later, your true nature, your character, your identity comes out, and then you have to deal with it. You have to make a decision. Do I continue asking for what I want, or what the scripture says, you really need to take care of yourself, but also to the needs of others?
I think it's important to mention this in the very beginning, that we need to remember that getting married is not, we are not getting married for selfish purposes. If you think you're getting married in order for your needs to be met, it's a wrong kind of attitude. You are getting married to serve him or to serve her, to serve your spouse and her or his needs.
So I'll speak to husbands because I know that I have to learn in this area constantly, continuously. And I want to focus on 5 things. It's not necessarily the most comprehensive plan and outline, but it will help us to focus on a few things that you probably will remember and apply in your marriage. First, husbands, you need to know that your wife needs affection, right? Your wife needs some attention. And I know that at the beginning of courtship or relationships, it's more natural. Because for myself, I compare that as a knight getting into the fortress.
You were intentional about that.
Oh yes, I get up in the morning. I know that I'm going to call my fiance or my wife if I'm just married, and I want to get her attention, her love, and I show on my side. I show attention and affection, but this. Pursue this process of growing into love has to continue, and this is not easy. At the beginning of the marriage, I remember writing more notes. Is that true? More than that?
Still have a whole box of them. Like the box barely closes.
Well, I'm not trying to brag about it. I'm just saying that now unfortunately, I'm texting at least, right? You should actually print all the text messages
yes.
and have enough of those. And there's no point or no limit for the husband to show that affection. And of course, in the previous part, we talked about God being a priority. And honestly, you won't be able to show that love properly without being plugged into the source of love, which is God Himself. So God is first, but then it's your wife, not even your kids or your relatives or your friends or your hobbies. It's your wife. Tell her I love you. I do.
Thank you.
And second need is, of course, communication. We need to ask questions. Husbands, we need to be aware of our weakness. We tend to either not ask questions at all or talk about our interests. And I think it's not only husbands, right? It's both ways.
I heard one wife, she said that she was planning to order herself a cap, and on the cap she was planning to write, "How are you?" In order to remind her husband when he comes home, he has to ask her a question, "How are you?" To ask about her day and so forth.
Right. Well, that's good. I mean, that's a good. Well, not the way she's prompting those questions, but asking question is not so hard. It's what's next after the question, because for us husbands, for males, it's very often tempting to give a quick solution. So, how was your day? Oh, I had hard day with my kids and with our kids. And then I'm like, okay, did you spank them? Did you talk with them? Did you tell them to read the Bible? Did you check on their homework? Well, sometimes you just need to zip it up and listen.
Don't try to fix your wife's problems. Just let her talk them out, and she will feel better already by just
eventually I need to fix your problems or help you to write the answer.
Yes.
Communication is important between husband and wife, and on husband's side it's a weakness, so we need to pay attention to that part. Honesty is very important for us husbands, leaders in the family. Sometimes it's I don't know if it's embarrassing, but we have that pride, and we're like, oh, I know that I'm right. Well, anyway, next time I'll do it right, but this time let's just forget it. No, let's be honest. Let's admit the fault. Yeah, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Next time we'll do better, or I'll do it differently. And we are not Superman. We need to learn, and if we have a problem, the problem is not going to go away unless you admit the problem, and then you're able to find a solution. Financial security, that's what your wife needs. And it's a tricky area in a sense that a lot of husbands, they try to make more money than their wives, or enough money for the family. And enough is good, but that has to be discussed with the wife so that they are not in a trap of just working and being materialistic and working hard and making more money. There has to be financial security, but there should not be an idol of mammon or finances or money.
I think this is something that can go too far, and I want to just briefly mention that wives should not manipulate on this and should not ask too much of their husbands. They should learn to be happy and satisfied with what God gives them. And on the other hand, I want to just make sure this is a little more general than just financial security, knowing that the husband's heart is for the family, and that the husband's heart is trying to support the family, the interests of the family, already gives a security to a wife, knowing that he will not go and waste money on something that is not in the best interests of the family.
Right. And lastly, number 5 is commitment. On husband's part, we husbands need to be committed to the relationships. We need to remind our wives that she is my priority number 1. She is important for me, and I'm committed to my relationships. And this seems like a very simple thing. Of course, yes, we assume that if we're married, then we're committed. No, not so much. All kinds of things happen, all kinds of temptations, all kinds of misunderstanding may happen. Or simply, if we don't talk about it, it just gives way to devil to send thoughts that are depressing and so on and so forth. So in order to prevent that, we need to talk about it, communicate it. And if you go through this list, communication is actually really important for everything.
Yes.
So God bless you.
Another part of the commitment, I think, is being intentional in preventing all kinds of possible ways to not be faithful. So maybe preventing ways where you can be alone with some other women, or preventing ways of communication with other women. Even if that doesn't mean anything, you're still trying to show to your wife that being committed to her means that you are being exclusive and avoiding inappropriate or just questionable relationship with any other women.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what husbands need?
Sure. Okay, so ladies, guess what? Your husband will need something other than you need. Number one need on the list here is the need for respect. Your husband needs you to respect him in all kinds of different ways. I'm just going to give you a few ideas. So respecting him means that you're not putting him down, especially when other people are around. So in a company of other people, you're not putting him down, you're not interrupting him, you're not saying something that he said something wrong. You don't say like, oh, that actually wasn't this way, let me tell you the true story, because you want to respect your husband and bring them up and not put him down. Another way is to reassure him of his capabilities. So don't try to control the way your husband drives you to church, or don't try to control where he parks the car. Let him, he's capable of driving, he's capable of parking his car, he's capable of doing his jobs, so do not try to interfere and control that.
And I want to add to this that same as for the wives, for the husbands, is important to see that creativity. We have to be intentional about showing respect or love or affection. And each individual, each husband is different. Somebody can be really good with doing things with his own hands. Another person is smart, another person is humorous, and so on and so forth. For the wife, it's very important to be creative on how to show that respect. It's not just the words, it's not the same template, it's being creative.
So pretty much do not take the respect from him. Do not step on his hose, like an air hose that he's breathing. The respect is kind of like the air that he breathes. If you take it away from him, he will start suffocating, and it will not be good for your relationship. So another thing about being respectful to your husband is being respectful when he's not around, and not discussing his weaknesses with your friends or with your parents or whoever you talk to. Do not never put him down, even if he doesn't hear you. So respect, number one. Number two is companionship. Apparently, your husband needs you to be a companion for him in all of his interests and all of his hobbies. I remember the time when, in the beginning of our marriage, Alex really liked to play volleyball with his friends. And I didn't mind that. The only thing I didn't understand is why he would take me with him to sit in the park to watch him play volleyball. Do you remember that?
Yes, that was a good time. I felt really good.
Okay, so it meant something for you to have me sitting in the park, being bored, watching the guys play volleyball. But now I understand that means companionship. Companionship is just being together, being shoulder to shoulder, side by side, in whatever projects that you do together or he does. And maybe it's not your project, but you just be there and support him and pay attention to what he's doing. So maybe right now is a good time to learn about your fiance's or your husband's interests and see how you can support him in that time. Another thing is that your husband's work needs to become your area of study. If you do not work at the same job, then at least learn what his job is all about. Learn the vocabulary, learn what he does there, so that when he comes back home, you can inquire of how his day went, not just saying, how was your day? But you can say something more specific and he can talk to you and open up more, and that will bring more connection between the two of you.
Eventually you may end up working in the same place. That's what happened with us. I started working in the school, and the first year when we got married, my new wife, she was not really interested in what I was doing for like at least half a year, I think. And then
I was looking for a different job.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that was a step on her side. First step, she started coming, volunteering in the private schools where I worked, and right now she's my right hand, so to speak.
Yes, I am glad. I am glad we're there together. Okay, step or need number 3, need of your husband. Number 3 is household support. Women, we are gifted with creating that comfort in the home. So household support means that you greet your husband and you prepare a meal for him. You pretty much take care of his clothes. You maintain a good atmosphere in the house, and whatever else he needs support with, you provide that support in the house. In Proverbs 31:27, it says, "She watches over the affairs of her household, and she does not eat the bread of idleness." I know you are not a lazy person, but just try to be more proactive and see how you can better be support in the house. So taking care of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, number 4 is the need for you to be attractive for your husband. Okay, this is another one that could go too far either way. So your husband wants you to be attractive, your husband wants you to be presentable, and he doesn't want you to meet him in your pajamas when he comes back from work and you stay home, right? Or like in a old robe. So greet your husband as you would greet your best friend, or you're somebody important, right? You dress up for somebody important. So prepare yourself, comb your hair, dress up nicely in a presentable way for your husband when he comes back home.
It depends on the situation, of course, and the time and the season of life. And obviously when we had our third child and I was coming from work and I saw my wife, with 3 kids, I had to also intentionally, stop and instead of asking for something, to give, to help, to help her in the time when she was so tired and overwhelmed. But overall, yeah, that's true. We really want, as husbands, we really want to have that gift that we saw the first time. We wanted it to be nice, and it doesn't have to be something that this world, the standards of this world are like, you have to be this size, you have to be this weight and stuff like that. No, be yourself, but be attractive. And attractiveness comes not just from the outside, but also from the inside.
Oh, yes.
The combination of the two, that what truly is appealing for a husband, and something that's really enjoyable.
Yes, so I really appreciate your gracefulness when you mentioned that you did understand your wife being tired or being extra busy with kids. That happens, but as a general idea, we as women should try to look nice. And I am not saying this to be taken to the other extreme, like you said, to the standards of this world, when women try to change themselves so much that they don't even look like themselves anymore, and they take this too far. They obsess about their looks. This can be taken so far as women could go and have food problems with eating. They can do a lot of damage to their bodies, pretty much, if you take this to the extreme. So be yourself, be mysterious, be interesting. That speaks a lot to the husband. And just make sure you present yourself nice and look good. And then number 5 is the need for sexual fulfillment. This is something that we as women might not think of very often, but this is important for men. And one of the reasons this is such a difference between the genders, between women and men, is that God did wire us differently. Men are built in a way with a lot more testosterone, which is the hormone that is driving this need for sexual fulfillment. Women have a lot less of that hormone, so they might not feel the need quite as often. Your job or your purpose in this, in the meeting of this need, is to be open, is to be willing to accept your husband's interests and your husband's desire. And another thing is, do not never manipulate your husband using his need for sexual fulfillment. You just be welcoming, you just be open and willing. And this is something else that takes communication. Do not assume things. Open up and talk about this thing as soon as you get married. This is something you need to start talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So to summarize this part and the previous part, we were talking about God's design for us. He's working on our marriages. He wants two people become one in unity. We are actually an image of Christ and the church. And when we build a family, we're pretty much doing what God did for all people. He sent a Savior. He sent a protector for the church. And the same way, husbands, they need to be protectors. They need to be leaders in their families. And in response, wife as a church need to be obedient, need to be serving the needs of the husband. We also talked about the problem of trying to change somebody else in the marriage. That's a huge problem if we get focused on the wrong thing. Instead, we need to serve each other. We need to understand the needs of each other, and in this second part we touch on those needs. So we will talk more about what problems come against the family in this world. In general, the family is being under the attack, and we will talk about that in our next part.